The sun hung high above the wide desert, shining with a heat that made everything shimmer like melted glass. The land was quiet, except for the soft crunch of dry sand under the hooves of a horse. Elias Turner rode slowly, letting his tired animal choose its own pace. He had been traveling since early morning, moving from one small town to another, trying to stay out of trouble and keep to himself. He liked peaceful days, the kind where nothing but the wind and the sky kept him company. Elias enjoyed these lonely rides. They helped him forget the confusion of his past work as a scout. He no longer wanted to be part of any group that argued, or fought, or made quick judgments about people. He preferred silence, open space, and the chance to meet those who needed help along the way, but only when fate placed them in his path. Today, he expected nothing unusual. The sky was clear, the road was empty, and his mind wandered from one calm thought to another. But then, something strange happened. A soft sound floated through the heat. Elias paused, listening. At first, he thought it might be the wind, but the sound came again thin, trembling, and full of fear. It was the sound of a child calling out. Elias straightened in his saddle. He was not the kind of man to ignore a call for help, especially from a child. He listened closely, turning his horse toward the direction of the voice. The sound came again, and this time he could make out words, though they were faint and broken by sobs. "Please, please help." Elias nudged his horse forward, moving faster now. His heart beat a little quicker. Not from fear, but from concern. A child alone in the desert was never a good sign. The land here was harsh, dry earth, sharp rocks, and long stretches of space with no shade. A grown adult could struggle out here. A child had almost no chance on their own. The voice grew clearer as he approached a cluster of large rocks rising from the ground like old bones. Elias slowed his horse and scanned the area. The child's frightened cry came again, echoing off the stone. He spotted movement, small, quick, and desperate. A boy, no more than 7 years old, stepped out from behind a tall rock. His hair was messy, his cheeks streaked with dust and dried tears. He looked scared, but relieved when he saw Elias. Elias lifted a hand in greeting, speaking in the calmest voice he could manage. The boy shook his head quickly, his eyes wide with worry. He pointed behind him, toward the tallest rock in the group. His voice trembled as he spoke. "My mommy. She needs help. Please." There was no hesitation inside Elias. Whatever the situation was, it was serious. He climbed off his horse and walked slowly toward the boy, making sure not to frighten him further. The child backed up a step, nervous but hopeful. "It's okay," Elias said softly. "Show me where she is." The boy led him around the side of the rock formation. And there, in the full sunlight, Elias saw a woman leaning against a wide, flat stone. She looked very weak, her eyes half closed. Her wrists were marked where rope had held them, rope that had already been removed or loosened earlier by the boy's efforts. She had clearly been there for a long time. Exposed to the hot sun, without protection, Elias felt a wave of sadness rise inside him. He didn't know why she had been left like this, but he didn't need details to understand she had suffered. What mattered was helping her now. The child rushed to her side and touched her shoulder gently. "Mommy, I brought someone," he whispered. The woman opened her eyes slightly. Her lips were dry, but she managed to look at Elias with quiet trust. She didn't seem afraid of him. She simply looked tired. So tired that even lifting her head seemed difficult. Elias knelt beside her and spoke softly. "Ma'am, don't worry. I'll help you. We just need to get you to some shade and give you water." The child nodded quickly, as if he feared Elias might change his mind. "She tried to call for help," he said in a shaky voice, "but no one came. I was the only one who heard her." Elias gave the boy a reassuring smile. You did the right thing. You were very brave. He took out his canteen and held it to the woman's lips. She managed a small sip, then another. Even those tiny amounts seemed to give her a bit of strength. Elias could see how hard she had tried to stay awake for her son's sake. Do you have a name? Elias asked the boy gently. The child wiped his tears and spoke softly. Tawa. Elias nodded. And your mommy? Nalin. The boy whispered. Elias repeated the names quietly, as if storing them carefully in his memory. Names had meaning. They made people feel less like strangers and more like someone you were responsible for. He looked around. We can't stay here, he said calmly. The sun will only get hotter. We need to move her somewhere safe. Tawa looked at him with worry. Can you carry her? Yes, Elias said. The woman, Nalin, tried to speak, but her voice was too soft to understand. Elias simply nodded to show her she didn't need to explain anything right now. All she needed to do was trust him. He placed his arms gently under her shoulders and knees. She was lighter than he expected, which troubled him. It meant she must not have eaten or had water for a while. He lifted her slowly, making sure not to cause her any pain. Nalin closed her eyes, but she didn't resist. Tawa watched anxiously, as if afraid his mother might slip or fall. Elias gave him a small smile. It's all right. I've got her. They moved toward the nearest patch of shade cast by a slope of rock. The shade wasn't much, but it was enough to cool the air slightly. Elias laid Nalin down on a soft patch of sand and placed his rolled-up coat under her head like a pillow. The child held his mother's hand tightly. She's going to be okay? He asked with trembling hope. Yes, Elias said gently. She just needs to rest, drink water, and stay out of the sun. We'll take care of her together. He offered more water to Nalin, letting her sip slowly. Her breathing steadied a little. The tension in Elias's chest eased. She was still weak, but she was responding. Elias then turned his attention to the boy. How long have you two been out here? Creed. Cluden. Tawa lowered his eyes. Since the morning. Maybe longer. Mommy told me to stay close. But when she got tired, I got scared. You did the right thing coming to find help, Elias said softly. Not every child could do that. The boy sniffled but managed a small, proud nod. Elias sat beside them, watching the open desert carefully. Though he didn't know exactly what had happened to Nalin, he sensed caution was important. The desert was full of travelers, some kind, some not. And whatever had led to Nalin being left like this was something Elias would need to understand later. For now, the only task that mattered was keeping them safe. Tawa tugged at Elias's sleeve. You won't leave us, right? Elias looked at him kindly. No, I won't leave. Not until your mother is strong again. I promise. The boy relaxed at those words, leaning against his mother. Nalin opened her eyes long enough to look at Elias with quiet gratitude. There was no fear in her expression, only relief and trust. Elias felt something stir in him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. The quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The desert was wide and lonely. But today, he wasn't alone. He had a child who needed him, a woman whose life depended on simple kindness, and a chance to do something that mattered. The sun continued its slow path across the sky. But now, the heat felt less harsh. Elias stayed close, offering water and comfort. Tawa talked softly to his mother, telling her it would be all right. Nalin listened with faint smiles, her strength returning little by little. And in that small patch of shade, in the middle of the vast desert, a stranger became their protector. Someone they could trust. In a world that had suddenly become frightening. Elias didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. He would not leave them until they were safe. The shade beneath the rock felt cooler now, almost like a gift from the desert itself. Elias kept a close eye on Nalin, while the soft silence of the afternoon wrapped around them. Her breathing had grown steadier since he helped her drink water. Tawa sat near her, holding her hand as if afraid she might slip away again if he let go. Elias knew they could not remain in that small, shaded spot forever. The sun would eventually shift, and the shade would disappear. They needed a place where Nalin could rest, without the risk of the heat growing worse. He remembered passing a narrow ravine earlier that morning. The place had tall rock walls, thin patches of bushes, and a little stream that usually held water at this time of year. It wasn't far, but carrying Nalin all the way there would take time and careful effort. He looked at Tawa, who was watching him with hopeful eyes. "There's a better resting place not too far from here," Elias said gently. "There's water and shade. I can take your mother there, if you help me." Tawa nodded quickly, ready to do anything. "I'll help," he said, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. Elias gave him a small smile. "Good. But first, let's make sure she has a little more strength." He offered Nalin another sip of water. She accepted it slowly, her eyelashes fluttering as she tried to stay awake. When she opened her eyes, she looked directly at Elias, and there was a quiet gratitude in her expression, deep, sincere, and filled with more trust than words could express. It was the kind of trust people gave only when they had no other choice. "We'll move you soon," Elias told her softly. "Just rest for a moment more. We'll go to a cooler place." Nalin managed a small nod. Though weak, she seemed to understand. Elias then stood and stretched his back, preparing for the journey ahead. He checked the sky. The sun was still high, but its brightness had begun to soften just a little. If they moved slowly and stayed aware of the heat, they could reach the ravine safely. He turned to Tawa again. "I'll carry her, but I'll need your help guiding my horse and keeping an eye on the path. Think you can do that?" Tawa straightened his small shoulders. "Yes," he said with quiet pride. Elias took a deep breath, then gently lifted Nalin into his arms again. This time she felt heavier, not because her weight changed, but because Elias knew how much she had endured. He wanted every step he took to be careful and respectful. Tawa walked close beside him, worried but determined not to fall behind. Elias placed Nalin carefully onto his horse, settling her against the saddle so she could lean comfortably without slipping. He held her steady while Tawa gathered the reins. "You ready?" Elias asked. Tawa nodded. They began to walk slowly across the desert, moving at a pace that would not shake Nalin too much. The sand crunched softly under their steps, and a warm breeze brushed past their faces. Elias stayed beside the horse the entire time, one hand lightly supporting Nalin, the other guiding their direction. Every few minutes, Nalin opened her eyes as if to check on her son. When she saw him walking beside Elias, close and safe, her face relaxed a little. Her trust in Elias seemed to grow with every careful movement he made. The journey felt longer than it truly was, because Elias kept stopping to make sure Nalin was comfortable. Tawa didn't complain even once. He simply walked with determination, glancing between his mother and the horizon, as if silently urging the ravine to appear faster. Finally, after what felt like nearly an hour, the ground began to dip. The land curved downward into a narrow, shaded passage between two tall rock walls. Shadows stretched across the path, and coolness touched their skin like a kind whisper. Elias heard the faint trickle of water nearby, soft but steady. "We're here," he said, letting relief wash over his voice. Tawa hurried a little ahead, eager to see the place. He gasped when he spotted the small stream that ran between the rocks, sparkling in the dim light. "There's water," he exclaimed, running back to Elias. "She can drink more now." Elias nodded. "Yes, she can. This place will help her get stronger." He brought the horse down into the ravine, and stopped near a flat stretch of ground where the sand was clean and the shade was deep. He lifted Nalin carefully and gently laid her down on the softest spot he could find. She sighed quietly, as if the cooler air gave her immediate comfort. Tawa knelt beside her and held her hand. "Look, Mommy. We found shade. You're safe now." Nalin opened her eyes slightly and looked around. Her lips curved in the smallest smile. She whispered something too faint to understand, but the warmth in her eyes said enough. Elias filled a small cup he carried with water from the stream. He let Nalin drink slowly. The coolness of the water seemed to bring color back to her cheeks. She wasn't fully recovered, but she was no longer on the edge of exhaustion. The change was subtle, but noticeable. Tawa watched Elias the entire time. Finally, he asked in a quiet voice, "Will she get better soon?" Elias gave him a soft smile. "Yes, with rest and water, she'll start feeling stronger." "Thank you," Tawa murmured, his eyes shining with gratitude. Elias didn't respond right away. He didn't help people for thanks. He helped them because he believed it was the right thing to do. But hearing Tawa's soft words touched something deep inside him. While Nalin rested, Elias began setting up a small camp. He tied his horse to a sturdy branch, sticking out of the rock wall. Then he placed stones in a circle and gathered a few dry bushes that had fallen from the cliffs. He didn't plan to make a fire unless the night grew cold, but preparing the area made the space feel safer and more welcoming. Tawa helped by gathering small handfuls of grass from shaded spots and placing them under his mother's head like a nest. Elias watched him with a small smile. The boy's love for his mother showed in everything he did, every touch, every glance, every worried breath. After settling the area, Elias sat down nearby and studied the rocks above them. He wanted to make sure the ravine was truly safe. It seemed calm and empty, just a quiet corner of nature offering shelter. The walls curved gracefully, like arms protecting them from the world outside. When he finished checking, he returned to Nalin. She was awake now, though still weak. Her gaze met his with quiet appreciation. Elias lowered his voice, speaking gently so he wouldn't tire her. "You're safe now. Rest as much as you need. We won't leave until you're well." Wozed. Nalin closed her eyes, and a peaceful expression softened her face. Tawa sat beside Elias and leaned against him, something he hadn't done before. "Do you think my mother will be able to walk again soon?" Elias placed a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder. "Yes. It may take a little time, but she will. She's strong. You're strong too." The boy rested quietly, watching his mother breathe in the gentle shade. After a few moments of silence, Tawa spoke again with curiosity. "Why did you help us? You didn't even know us." Elias took a slow breath. "Because sometimes," he said softly, "helping someone is the only right thing to do. And when you see someone who needs you, you don't wait. You just go." Tawa looked at him with admiration. "I'm glad you came." Elias smiled. "I'm glad I heard you." They stayed like that for a while, letting the silence settle comfortably around them. The ravine felt peaceful, and the cool air moved gently through the space, like a soft hand. As the sun slowly drifted toward the evening sky, the shadows grew deeper. Nalin slept peacefully now, her breathing smooth and steady. Elias watched her with quiet relief. She was no longer the exhausted figure he had found in the open desert. She was healing. Tawa lay near his mother, half asleep, half awake, as if keeping silent watch. Elias placed a light blanket over them both. He looked out toward the desert beyond the ravine and felt a tug of uncertainty. He didn't know who had left Nalin out there, or how they might react when they learned she had been found. But he knew something else, more important: he would not let anything trouble her or her son while they remained under his care. For now, they were safe. Tomorrow would bring new decisions, new conversations, and maybe new challenges. But tonight, the desert was calm, the air was cool, and Nalan's gentle breathing proved that their journey toward safety had truly begun. The night passed quietly in the ravine. The cooler air flowed softly through the rocks, bringing with it a sense of safety that none of them had felt earlier in the day. Elias sat awake for most of the night, not because he was afraid, but because he wanted to make sure Nalan and Tawa slept peacefully. He kept the small fire low and warm, letting its glow cast a soft golden light on the walls around them. By early morning, the sky began turning from dark blue to pale orange. Birds chirped softly from the tops of the rocks, greeting the new day. Elias breathed in the crisp morning air and felt hopeful. He turned to check on Nalan and found her awake, looking stronger than she had the day before. Her eyes were clearer now. She blinked, slowly, then offered Elias a faint smile. It was small, but it was real, and it held gratitude that words could never fully express. Elias approached her gently. "Good morning," he said quietly. "How are you feeling today?" Nalan took a moment before answering. Her voice was soft but steady. "Better, better, 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 better." Tawa, who had slept curled up next to her, woke up as soon as he heard her voice. He sat up quickly, rubbing his eyes with sleepy hands. "Mommy," he said, leaning close. "Are you okay?" Nalan brushed her fingers through his hair and nodded. "Yes, little one. I'm all right now." Tawa's face brightened with relief, and he hugged her tightly. Nalan looked over at Elias again, and her expression grew gentle, thankful, trusting. Elias stepped back to give them a moment. He tended to the fire, added a few dry twigs, and warmed the leftover water he had in a small metal pot. He planned to let Nalan drink something warm to help her gather more strength. When the water was ready, he offered it to her carefully. She drank a few sips and closed her eyes, as if letting the warmth settle inside her. Tawa watched her closely. "Can we go home today?" he asked softly, looking between her and Elias. Nalan hesitated. Elias saw the uncertainty in her expression and took a seat beside them. "We need to think carefully," Elias said in a calm voice. "Your home might be a distance away, and Nalan still needs more rest before she walks too far." Nalan nodded slowly. "Our village is not close," she murmured, "and the path can be tiring." Tawa's face fell a little, but Elias rested a hand on his shoulder. "We'll get there," he assured him. "We just need to make sure your mother is fully ready." Tawa nodded, trying to be patient. Elias looked at Nalan again. "If you're comfortable speaking now, I'd like to understand what happened before I found you. Only if you want to tell me." Nalan took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. She didn't want to speak about anything painful, but Elias asked with such respect that she felt safe explaining. Her voice remained calm as she shared what she could. "There had been some misunderstandings between some families near the outer edge of our lands," she began. "Some people came where they were not used to being, and they met my group unexpectedly. Words were exchanged, and everyone became unsure and afraid. No one wanted trouble, but confusion made it difficult." Elias listened quietly, never interrupting. "During the confusion," Nalan continued, "I became separated from my family. My son followed me. I tried to stay calm, tried to help everyone understand there was no need to fear each other. But it was difficult to make people listen in that moment." She paused, taking a slow breath. "I was left in the desert during the confusion," she said gently, not describing anything harsh. "And my son tried to get help. He is the reason I am alive now." Tawa leaned against her arm proudly. Elias nodded with deep understanding. He knew misunderstandings between different communities were common during these times. But he also knew Nalan was not someone who would cause harm to anyone. Her voice and presence were calm, peaceful, and steady. "You went through a lot," Elias said softly. But now you're safe, and we'll make sure you stay that way. Nalin smiled with gratitude. As the morning passed, Elias helped Nalin sit up more comfortably. She managed to eat a small portion of dried fruit he offered, and she drank more water from the stream. Each hour brought a little more color to her face, a little more strength to her voice. By midday, Nalin felt well enough to sit up on her own. Elias was pleased but still cautious. He wanted her to regain her strength fully before taking any long journey. Tawa, full of energy now that his mother was okay, walked around the ravine exploring. He picked up smooth stones, watched tiny lizards darting between cracks, and happily narrated every little discovery to his mother. Look, Mommy. This rock is shaped like a heart. Nalin smiled and touched the stone he brought her. It is beautiful. Elias watched them with warmth in his eyes. Tawa's joy seemed to bring life back into the quiet ravine. After Tawa settled down again, Elias turned to Nalin. I think it's time we talk about how to get you both home. Your people may be looking for you. Nan. Nalin looked into the distance thoughtfully. They will be worried. And when I return, they must know you helped me. Elias shook his head lightly. I don't expect anything in return. I just want to make sure you get home safely. Nalin studied him for a moment, as if trying to understand the kind of man who helped strangers without expecting anything. She felt comforted by his presence, and she had no doubt he was sincere. But there is something we must consider. Elias continued. When I bring you back, your people might not know who I am. They might think I'm someone who means harm. Nalin nodded slowly. She understood well. Her people were protective of each other, and the world outside their home was full of uncertainty. Anyone unfamiliar could be seen with caution. I will speak for you, she said firmly, with her quiet but strong voice. Elias smiled softly. I appreciate that. But I also want you to feel safe during the journey. Nalin looked down at her hands resting gently on her lap. You have already shown us safety. Tawa looked up at Elias with wide eyes. You won't leave us, will you? Not until we get home? Not until we get home. Elias gently ruffled the boy's hair. No, I won't leave. I'll take you both back. I promise. With that promise spoken aloud, something settled between the three of them, a kind of bond formed through kindness and trust. The rest of the afternoon became a time of quiet preparation. Elias repaired a small tear in his saddle, checked his horse's hooves, and filled his canteen with fresh water from the small stream. Nalin used the time to rest and gather strength. She practiced standing for a few moments, leaning lightly on the rock wall. She felt weak at first, but gradually steadier. Elias watched her carefully, ready to help if she needed anything. But Nalin was determined. She wanted to be strong enough for the journey ahead. Tawa spent time sitting beside his mother, telling her little stories about things he had seen around the ravine. She listened with a peaceful smile, stroking his hair softly. By late afternoon, the heat softened again as the sun began to lower in the sky. Elias felt this was the right time to talk about the next step. We'll leave in the early morning, he said. The air will be cool, and the walk will be easier. Nalin nodded. That is wise. Tomorrow, Tawa whispered, holding his mother's hand. Elias smiled. Yes, tomorrow. That night, they rested again in the safety of the shaded ravine. The fire burned low, casting gentle light around them. Nalin slept peacefully, comforted by the knowledge that she would soon see her people again. Tawa slept with his head on her lap, dreaming with a smile on his face. Elias kept watch as he had the night before, but this time his heart felt lighter. The desert no longer felt threatening. It felt like a place that had brought them together for a reason. He looked at the small family resting peacefully under the soft glow of the fire and knew that helping them was the right choice. Tomorrow, they would begin their journey toward home together. And no matter what waited ahead, Elias was ready. Elias woke before the sun rose. The sky was still dark, touched only by a soft gray glow near the horizon. The air felt cool and fresh inside the ravine, and the world was calm in a way that made the morning feel almost sacred. He sat up slowly and looked around. Nalin was still asleep, resting peacefully with her head leaning lightly against the rock wall. Tawa lay curled next to her, one hand gently holding hers, even in his sleep. It touched Elias to see how close they were, how much love passed quietly between them without needing words. Elias stood and stretched his tired muscles. He checked the small fire to make sure it was fully out, then walked toward the stream. He cupped cool water in his hands and splashed his face, letting the chill wake him fully. Today was an important day. They would begin the journey to Nalin's home. He filled the canteens carefully, making sure they had enough water for the first hours of travel. Then he prepared a simple breakfast of dried fruit and small pieces of bread. He placed the food near Nalin and Tawa so they would see it when they woke. The sky slowly brightened as the minutes passed. A faint orange glow rose behind the distant hills, spreading soft colors across the desert. Birds began their morning songs, chirping gently from the cliffs above. The ravine felt alive with quiet hope. Soon Nalin stirred. She blinked several times as the light touched her face. When she saw Elias nearby, she smiled softly. "Good morning," she whispered. Elias returned the smile. "Good morning. How do you feel?" "Creeding. Creeding. Creeding. Stronger," she said honestly. "Still a little tired, but much better." "That's good to hear," Elias said. "We'll take the journey slowly. No rush." Tawa woke a moment later, stretching like a sleepy kitten. When he noticed his mother awake, he sat up quickly and hugged her. "You slept so long," he laughed gently. Nalin stroked his back, smiling warmly. "It feels good to rest in a safe place." Elias watched the moment with quiet happiness. Then he gestured toward the food. "Eat a little before we go. It will help give you energy." They ate together in silence, enjoying the peaceful morning. After breakfast, Nalin gathered her strength and stood slowly with Elias's help. Her steps were careful, but she was steady. The rest had done her well. Tawa carried her small woven bag, proud to help with something. Elias saddled his horse, making sure everything was secure. When they were ready, he looked at Nalin and spoke gently. "If you ever feel tired, just tell me. We can stop anytime." Nalin nodded. "Thank you." With that, they left the safety of the ravine and began walking across the open desert. The early morning shadows stretched long across the sand, and the breeze felt cool on their skin. Elias walked beside Nalin, watching her closely but respectfully. Tawa walked a little ahead at times, excited to return home. For the first hour, they moved at a slow but steady pace. Nalin walked quietly but confidently, her strength returning little by little. The desert around them slowly transformed as the sun climbed higher, turning the pale light into warm gold. Tawa suddenly pointed toward a distant hill. Nalin smiled. "Yes, that is near our home." Elias felt a quiet relief. The journey was going well, and Nalin had handled it with admirable strength. As the sun rose further, they stopped to rest under the shade of a tall rock. Elias offered water, and they all drank. Nalin's face glowed softly in the light, and her eyes held calm confidence. "You're doing well," Elias said kindly. "Because of your help," Nalin replied. Elias shook his head gently. "You had the strength already. I just gave a little support." Her smile widened with gratitude. After resting, they continued walking. The land changed gradually. More plants appeared, small bushes, tiny wildflowers, and patches of greener earth showing life beyond the dry desert. Tawa grew more excited with every step. "My home is near," he called happily. Nalin looked at Elias with soft eyes. "Thank you for staying with us." Elias nodded. I promised I wouldn't leave you until you were safe. As they walked closer, faint shapes began to appear in the distance. Simple shelters made from wood and earth, blending naturally with the land. The structures were spaced out gently, surrounded by open land and tall trees that provided shade. Thin streams of smoke drifted into the sky from morning fires, where families prepared food. Nalin's steps slowed as she saw her home. Her eyes filled with emotion, relief, gratitude, memory. It had been a hard journey, but now the sight of her home gave her renewed strength. Tawa began running ahead, but Nalin called gently, "Stay close, little one." He stopped immediately and waited for them. As they approached, a few figures noticed them in the distance. People began walking forward, some with cautious steps, others with relieved expressions. They had been searching for Nalin for hours, uncertain what had happened to her. Seeing her walking home, supported by a man they did not know, filled them with both curiosity and concern. Elias slowed his steps, not wanting to cause alarm. He stayed a respectful distance behind Nalin as her people gathered near. A woman stepped forward, first a relative of Nalin, perhaps a sister or close friend. Her face was filled with worry and love. "Nalin," the woman whispered emotionally. "We were so worried." Nalin reached out and touched her hand gently. "I am home now." Another few people approached, looking from Nalin to Elias. Their expressions were cautious, unsure of who he was. Tawa spoke quickly, his voice bright and innocent. "He helped us. He helped Mommy. He made her better." The people looked at Nalin for confirmation. Nalin lifted her hand, pointing gently toward Elias. "This man saved my life," she said softly but clearly. "He helped me when I had no strength. He watched over us. He protected my son." Her words melted the caution in their expressions. The tone of respect in her voice told her people everything they needed to know. An older man stepped forward, the leader of the group. His eyes held wisdom and kindness. He looked at Elias with calm curiosity. "Thank you," he said in a steady voice. "You brought one of our own home. For that, we are grateful." Elias shook his head lightly. "I didn't expect thanks. I just wanted to help." The leader nodded. "Goodness does not need reward, but it deserves recognition." Nalin smiled gently at Elias. Tawa stood beside her, holding her hand proudly. "You should stay for a meal." Elias hesitated. He didn't want to intrude on their lives. But Nalin placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Please stay," she said quietly, "just for a little while." Her words were filled with sincerity, an invitation not based on obligation, but from the heart. Elias nodded slowly. "All right. For a little while." Mina, Mina, Mina. They guided him toward the center of the village, where a warm fire had been lit. People prepared food, and children gathered near Tawa, eager to hear him talk about their journey. Nalin sat on a soft blanket, resting while her family surrounded her with gentle comfort. Elias sat nearby, watching the peaceful scene unfold around him. He felt a warmth inside, a sense of belonging he rarely experienced. He didn't speak much, but Nalin kept glancing at him with a grateful smile, as if thanking him again, without words. When the meal was done, and the sun began to lower in the sky, Elias stood slowly. "I should go," he said softly. Nalin rose carefully and walked toward him. "Before you leave," she said, "I want you to know something." Elias waited patiently. "You helped us when we were alone," she said. "You showed kindness when we had nothing to give. That kindness will stay with us forever." Tawa held Elias's hand. "Will we see you again?" Elias smiled gently. "Maybe one day. The desert is wide, but paths cross in unexpected ways." Nalin nodded, understanding the quiet truth in his words. Elias mounted his horse and looked at them one last time, the mother he had saved, the brave child who had called for help, and the peaceful home they belonged to. They stood together, waving softly. Elias lifted his hand in farewell. Then he turned toward the open desert, letting the warm wind guide him forward. He rode away quietly, knowing deep inside that he had done something meaningful, something that connected hearts across distance, fear, and misunderstanding. And as Nalan and Tawa watched him disappear over the horizon, they knew they would never forget the stranger who brought hope into their lives.